if you ever notice that, like, you can read English articles, no problem. Maybe even, ace a grammar quiz. But when it comes to actually speaking, the confidence just kind of like goes out the window.
Yeah.
And you're left like kind of fumbling.
I know exactly what you mean.
Where you are not alone if you've ever felt that way.
Right.
Because in this deep dive, we're going to be talking about how to speak English with confidence.
I love it.
We're going to be exploring all kinds of strategies and tips to help you speak more boldly and fluently. So we've got a lot of great resources we've been looking at.
We do.
And we're really going to kind of like dive deep into this topic today.
This is going to be a good one.
So first of all, I guess, like, why is speaking confidently even, like, why is that even important?
Well, I think that, most English learners, I think, really want to be able to speak with other people.
Yeah.
And so often what holds people back is that they feel nervous
Yep.
or they lack the confidence to actually, get out there
Yeah.
and use their English.
Right.
So we want to help people with that.
Confidence is a huge
It is a huge thing.
thing. So what are some of the reasons why people might not feel confident speaking English?
Well, our sources identify kind of like 4 major reasons.
Okay.
The first is fear of making mistakes,
Okay.
which I think is very, very common.
It's a big one.
Yeah. A lot of people worry about, making mistakes or sounding stupid or being judged.
Right.
So they just don't speak at all.
Yeah.
And then lack of practice.
Sure.
You can study all the grammar you want, but if you don't actually get out there and practice speaking,
You're not going to get back.
you're not going to improve.
Yeah.
And then overthinking.
Oh, yeah.
This is a big one.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they get in their heads and they start thinking too much about the grammar,
Totally.
about the vocabulary, and they end up getting stuck. Yeah.
And then finally, just like low self-confidence.
Okay.
Which I think is kind of like an umbrella term
Sure.
that encompasses all of these other problems.
Yeah.
So, these are some of the main reasons why people might not feel confident speaking English.
It's interesting because it really is sort of like a cycle,
It is.
The more you're afraid to make mistakes, the less you speak. And then the less you speak, the less confident you feel.
Right.
And so it just keeps kind of feeding on itself.
Absolutely.
But what's really encouraging is that the sources we've looked at really emphasize that confidence is something you can build.
It is a skill you can develop.
It's not just you either have it or you don't.
That's right.
And that's really encouraging because it means that anybody can become a confident speaker.
Anyone can improve their confidence.
Yeah.
It just takes time and effort.
So let's dive into some of these strategies then.
Okay. Sounds good.
For how to actually build confidence.
Yeah, let's do it. One of the things that really came up over and over again in our research was this idea of thinking in English.
Yeah.
Can you kind of like explain what that means and why it's so important?
So I think a lot of times, English learners, when they're speaking, they think of what they want to say in their native language, and then they translate it into English. Yeah. And that translation process takes time.
Yeah.
And it can really slow you down. So the idea of thinking in English is to basically cut out that middle step.
Yeah.
So you're not translating anymore. You're just thinking directly in English.
I see.
And when you do that, your speech becomes more fluent.
Gotcha.
More natural.
Yeah.
And you're less likely to make mistakes.
Okay.
Because you're not having to think about the grammar and the vocabulary so much.
So it's like if I'm trying to think of a sentence in English, and I'm thinking of it first in my native language.
Right.
And then translating it. It's like I'm creating this extra layer of...
It's an extra step.
Work for my brain.
Yeah.
That my brain has to do.
Right.
But if I'm just thinking in English, it's like I'm just going straight to the source.
Yes.
Right.
Like you're speaking from your thoughts rather than from a translation.
Yeah. Okay. I get that.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, I guess. Like how do you know if you're still translating?
Well, I think there are a few signs.
Okay.
One is if you find yourself pausing a lot when you speak.
Yeah.
Like you're constantly having to stop and think about what you want to say. That's a sign that you're probably still translating.
Okay.
Another sign is if you have trouble forming sentences quickly.
Yeah.
Even if you know the individual words.
Yeah.
You might struggle to put them together into a sentence
Wow.
because you're still thinking in your native language.
I see.
And then another sign is if you feel really nervous or frustrated when you're speaking, like you're constantly worried about making mistakes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, because you're not confident in your ability to speak fluently. Yeah.
So those are just a few signs that you might still be translating.
Okay, so let's say that we're like, yeah, okay, I'm definitely translating.
Yeah.
How do I actually start thinking in English?
Well, there are a lot of different techniques that you can use.
Okay.
One of the simplest is to start with just like simple words and phrases.
Okay.
So like as you're going about your day,
Yeah.
you can just like narrate what you're doing in English.
Okay.
So if you're making coffee, you can say, I'm making coffee.
I see.
I'm pouring the water. I'm adding sugar.
So just like the simple everyday things.
Yeah, just like the little things,
Huh.
just to get your brain used to thinking in English.
Gotcha.
And then another technique is to label things around your house in English.
That's a good idea.
Yeah. So you can put sticky notes on your furniture, on your appliances,
Okay.
whatever, just to kind of like create that visual reminder.
I see.
So you're trying to think in English.
Yeah, I like that.
And then another technique is to talk to yourself in English.
Now, this might sound a little strange, but it's actually a really good way to practice. So you can just like talk about your day.
Yeah.
You can talk about your plans.
Okay.
You can even just like talk about random thoughts that pop into your head.
So it's like I'm having a conversation with myself.
Yeah, exactly.
But in English.
But in English.
Okay.
And then another technique is to try to think in English before you go to sleep.
Interesting.
Yeah. So like you can just like lie in bed and kind of like review your day in English, or you can think about your plans for the next day.
Okay.
Or you can just like let your mind wander and see where it takes you.
So it's like getting my brain like primed.
Yeah, priming your brain for English.
Yeah. Okay.
And then another technique is to have imaginary conversations in English.
Okay.
So this is where you kind of like create a scenario in your head and you imagine yourself having a conversation with someone.
Okay.
So like you can imagine yourself ordering food at a restaurant.
Okay. Or you can imagine yourself asking for directions.
Yeah.
Or you can imagine yourself just like chatting with a friend.
So basically just like any situation.
Yeah. Any situation where you might need to use English.
Yeah. Okay.
And that can help you to kind of like prepare for those situations in real life.
I see.
And then another technique is to change the language settings on your phone and your computer to English.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, so that you're constantly being exposed to English, even when you're not actively studying.
Yeah, okay.
And then finally, you know, surround yourself with English as much as possible.
Yeah.
So like watch English movies and TV shows, listen to English music and podcasts, read English books and articles.
Yeah.
Just like immerse yourself in the language.
Yeah.
And the more you do that, the easier it will become to think in English.
Okay, so those are all really good tips for like, you know, kind of getting yourself in that mindset of thinking in English.
Yeah.
But what about actually speaking out loud? Yeah. What are some tips for, you know, feeling more confident?
Okay. Well, one tip is to speak slowly.
Okay.
When you speak slowly, you give yourself more time to think. And you also sound more confident.
I see.
Because you're not rushing.
Yeah.
And you're not stumbling over your words.
So it's like that idea that sometimes less is more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yeah. Okay.
And then another tip is to practice with a language partner.
Okay.
So find someone who you can speak English with regularly.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a native speaker.
Right.
It can be anyone who's learning English.
Okay.
And the important thing is just to get that practice.
Yeah.
And to get feedback.
Yeah. Okay.
And then another tip is to use English media to your advantage.
Okay.
So like I said before, watch English movies and TV shows, listen to English music and podcasts.
Yeah.
And pay attention to how native speakers are speaking.
Okay.
Pay attention to their pronunciation, their intonation.
Yeah. Their rhythm.
Yeah.
And then try to imitate them.
Okay.
And then you can even like record yourself speaking.
Yeah.
And then compare your recording to a native speaker.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Yeah. It's a really good way to identify areas where you can improve.
So it's like I'm getting that direct comparison.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then another tip is to embrace your mistakes.
Okay.
Everyone makes mistakes. It's part of the learning process.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to make mistakes. In fact, the more mistakes you make, the more you'll learn.
Yes.
So just like let go of that fear of making mistakes.
Yeah.
And just focus on communicating.
That's really important.
It is.
Because I think a lot of people get so hung up
They do.
on like making sure everything is perfect.
Yeah.
That they never actually get to the point of just like speaking.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're so worried about being perfect
Right.
that they never actually get to the point of being fluent.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what about some like I don't know, I guess like psychological tricks
Oh, yeah. There's some good ones.
for feeling more confident.
Yeah. So one trick is to smile.
Smile.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you smile, you automatically feel more confident.
I see.
And you also sound more friendly and approachable.
Okay.
So it's a win-win.
Yeah.
And then another trick is to visualize yourself speaking confidently.
Okay.
So like before you go into a situation where you need to speak English,
Yeah.
just take a few minutes to close your eyes and imagine yourself speaking confidently and fluently, and imagine the other person understanding you perfectly.
Yeah, yeah.
And the more you do that,
Yeah.
the more confident you'll feel in real life.
So it's kind of like you're training your brain.
Yeah, it's like mental rehearsal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then another trick is to celebrate your successes.
Okay.
So like every time you have a successful conversation in English,
Mm-hmm.
or you give a presentation in English, or you just like order a coffee in English without any problems.
Yeah.
Just take a moment to celebrate that success.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be anything big.
Right.
You can just like give yourself a mental high five,
Yeah.
or you can like buy yourself a little treat,
Yeah.
or you can just like tell yourself, good job.
Yeah.
The important thing is just to acknowledge your progress
Okay.
and to give yourself credit for the hard work that you're doing.
I like that because it's really easy to get discouraged, you know?
It is.
You're only focused on like the end goal.
Yeah.
And you're not giving yourself credit for
For the small wins along the way.
the small wins along the
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another trick is to use the 3-second rule.
What is that?
So this is where like when you have something you want to say in English,
Mm-hmm.
you don't give yourself more than 3 seconds to think about it.
Okay.
You just count down from 3 and then
Yeah.
you just say it.
I see.
And this helps to prevent you from overthinking and from getting stuck in your head.
So it's like I'm forcing myself to just like go for it.
Yeah, just go for it.
Okay.
Don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Just say it.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
And then another trick is to practice with safe humans.
Safe humans.
Yeah. So this is like your pets,
Okay.
your plants,
Oh, I see.
your stuffed animals,
Okay.
even just like your reflection in the mirror.
That's what you.
The idea is that you're practicing speaking English,
Yeah.
but you're not putting any pressure on yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're not worried about being judged.
Yeah. I get that.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm just getting comfortable with the sound.
Yeah, just getting comfortable with the
The
sound.
English.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another trick is to steal a celebrity's swagger.
Okay.
So this is where you think of a celebrity who you admire,
Yeah.
and you think is really confident.
Yeah.
And then you try to imagine yourself as that celebrity,
Okay.
and you try to speak English the way that they would speak English.
So it's like I'm borrowing their confidence.
Yeah, you're borrowing their confidence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's interesting.
And it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Because you can kind of like play around with different personas
Yeah.
and see what feels good for you.
Okay.
And then finally, you can prepare pocket phrases.
Pocket phrases.
Yeah, so these are like pre-made phrases
That's
that
good.
you can use in common situations.
Okay.
So like if you don't understand something, you can say, can you repeat that, please?
Okay.
Or if you need more time to think, you can say, just a moment, please.
Yeah.
And by having these phrases ready to go,
Yeah.
you can avoid those awkward silences.
Yeah.
And you can feel more confident in your ability to handle any situation.
Okay. So that's a lot of really good tips.
Yeah.
What about like mindset? Like, what are some mindset shifts that people can make to feel more confident?
Well, I think one of the biggest mindset shifts is to reframe mistakes.
Yeah.
So instead of seeing mistakes as failures,
Yeah.
see them as opportunities to look like every time you make a mistake,
Yeah.
you're getting feedback
Right.
on what you need to work on.
So it's like it's data.
Yeah, it's data.
Yeah.
It's valuable information.
Okay.
And then another mindset shift is to focus on connection over perfection.
Okay.
So the goal of speaking English is to communicate.
Mm,
It's not to be perfect.
right.
So don't worry so much about making mistakes.
Yeah.
Just focus on getting your message across.
Yeah.
And if the other person understands you,
Yeah.
then you've succeeded.
Yeah. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Because I think it's really easy to get caught up in like, I have to say this perfectly.
Yeah.
And if I don't, then like it's a failure.
Right.
But really the goal is just to communicate.
The goal is to connect. Yeah.
Okay.
And then another mindset shift is to visualize success.
Okay.
So like I said before, you can close your eyes and imagine yourself speaking confidently and fluently.
Yeah.
And the more you do that, the more you'll believe that you can do it.
Okay. So you're basically training your brain
You're training your brain for success.
to believe in yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about a lot of different strategies and tips.
Yeah, we have.
What are some like challenges that people can do?
Okay, well, one challenge is to speak English for 5 minutes every day for a week.
5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it doesn't matter what you talk about.
Right.
You can talk to yourself. You
Yeah.
can talk to a language partner. You can even just like talk to your pet.
Yeah.
The important thing is just to get that practice.
So I'm just making sure that I'm
You
speaking
can just get those rips in.
every day.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then another challenge is to do one thing every day for a week
Okay.
that pushes you outside of your comfort zone.
Okay.
So this could be like giving a presentation in English
Okay.
or joining an online English conversation group
Okay.
or even just like talking to a stranger in English.
I see.
The idea is just to do something that makes you a little bit nervous,
Yeah.
but that also helps you to grow.
Okay.
And then another challenge is to try to think in English for 24 hours.
24 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so this is a tough one.
Yeah.
But it's a really good way to immerse yourself in the language.
Okay.
So for 24 hours, try to think all of your thoughts in English.
Okay.
So like when you're getting dressed in the morning, think to yourself, I'm putting on my shirt, I'm putting on my pants.
Sure.
When you're eating breakfast,
Yeah.
think to yourself, I'm eating cereal, I'm drinking coffee.
So just like narrating my day.
Yeah, just narrate your day.
Okay.
And then at the end of the day,
Yeah.
you can write a journal entry in English
Okay.
about your experience.
I see.
So yeah, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But it's a really good way to improve your English.
Okay. So those are some good challenges.
Yeah.
I guess, like, what are some of the mental barriers
Yeah.
that people might face?
Okay. Well, I think one of the biggest mental barriers is fear of making mistakes,
Yeah,
which we've talked about already. But it's worth repeating because it's such a common problem.
it is.
And the way to overcome this fear is to just remember that everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah.
It's part of the learning process.
Yeah.
So don't beat yourself up
Right.
when you make a mistake.
Yeah.
Just learn from it
Yeah.
and move on.
Okay.
And then another mental barrier is lack of confidence.
Yeah.
And this can be a really tough one to overcome
It is.
because it's often based on our past experiences.
Yeah.
So like maybe you had a bad experience in the past where you tried to speak English and someone made fun of you, or you just like felt really embarrassed.
Yeah.
And that experience can really stick with you.
Yeah.
And it can make you afraid to speak English again.
Right.
But the important thing to remember is that that was just one experience. And it doesn't have to define your future. Yeah.
You can choose to learn from that experience and to move on
Yeah.
and to start building your confidence again.
So it's kind of like, I'm not letting that one bad experience dictate the rest of my English speaking journey.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then another mental barrier is the habit of translating. Yeah.
Which we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
And this is something that can be really hard to break
It is.
because it's such a ingrained habit,
Yeah.
but it is possible to break it.
Yeah.
And the way to do it is to just keep practicing thinking in English.
Okay.
And the more you practice,
Yeah.
the easier it will become.
So it's like I'm training my brain
Yeah. You're retraining your brain.
to think in a different way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
And then finally, a lot of people get discouraged easily. And this is understandable
It is.
because learning a language is hard.
Yeah.
It takes time and effort.
Yeah. And there are going to be times when you feel like you're not making any progress.
Right.
But the important thing to remember is that every little bit of effort counts.
Yeah.
So even if you can only study for 15 minutes a day, or even if you can only practice speaking for 5 minutes a day,
Yeah.
that's still better than nothing.
Right.
And over time, those small efforts will add up
Yeah.
and you will make progress.
So it's like consistency is key.
Consistency is key.
Yeah. Okay.
So don't give up.
Yeah.
Just keep going and
Yeah.
you'll get there.
So I guess like the overall takeaway here is that speaking English with confidence is not about being perfect.
It's not about perfection.
It's about being consistent.
Yeah.
It's about practicing.
Yeah.
And it's about having a positive mindset.
That's right. Yeah. And it's about focusing on connection,
Yeah.
not perfection.
So it's like I can be a confident English speaker even if I make mistakes, even if I don't know every word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even if you have an accent.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So don't let those things hold you back.
Okay. So for our listeners out there who are maybe listening to this, feeling inspired,
Yeah.
what is like one thing that they can do?
Well, I would say that the most important thing is to just start speaking.
Okay.
So like find a language partner,
Yeah.
join a conversation group,
Yeah.
or just start talking to yourself in English.
Yeah.
The more you speak,
Yeah.
the more confident you'll become.
So just get out there and start practicing.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of these amazing tips and insights.
Oh, you're welcome.
I think this has been really helpful for our listeners.
I hope so.
And yeah, we'll see you next time
See you next time.
for another deep dive.
Sounds good.
Bye.